On today's Locked On Giants podcast, are the New York Giants set at quarterback or is a signal caller still in play at number 3? We discuss that and a whole lot more with special guest Coach Gene Clemons of New York Giants on SI and a Giant issue. That's coming your way next here on the Locked On Giants podcast.
You are Locked On Giants, your daily New York Giants podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, New York Giant fans, and welcome to another edition of the Locked On Giants podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast family, your team every day. I'm your host, Patricia Traina, credential member of the New York Giants media for Locked On, as well as for New York Giants on SI, which is where you can find all of our written work. And as always, welcome on into our Blue Crew community members, our newcomers, our everydayers, and everybody in between. Thank you for spending part of your day with us here on the Locked On Giants podcast. And folks, you asked for him again, so I asked for him to come on. He's here, Coach Gene Clemons, who has been doing an amazing job on Giants, New York Giants on SI. You can check out his Good, Great, and Ugly series, which is an absolute treat. You can also catch him on the New York Giants on SI YouTube channel, where he has a podcast that is growing. And he tells it the way it is, and that's why we love him, and that's why he's here. So Coach Gene, thanks so much for joining us.
And thank you for having me, as always. And shout out to the entire Locked On Giants community. Many of you have come over and checked out a Giant issue, and I really do appreciate it. Love being able to talk ball and, kind of give you a different look at things. And so obviously, PT, that's what I've always tried to do, is just it's my view, it's my thoughts based off what I see. It doesn't always run the same way as everybody else, but I think that I at least try to give a legitimate reasoning to why I'm thinking the way I'm thinking. And people can agree or they can disagree, but I think we all want the same thing. We all want excitement. We all want to enjoy the product that we're watching. And I know from you and I's perspective, it's always better when the Giants are winning, right?
Absolutely.
So, nothing gets better than that. I think we all want that. And so whatever gets us back to that, I am all for.
Yes, as am I. And Gene, we got to talk about this offseason, some of the things the Giants have done in free agency. Let's start with the quarterback. Now, for those who maybe didn't see the episode, last time I had Coach Gene on, I said to him, who would be the best quarterback, the best veteran bridge to potentially mentor a young guy? And Coach Gene, who did you say? I think you hit it on the head, didn't you?
Yeah, at the time I said Jameis Winston, and it seemed pretty logical to me. I don't understand why you would go out and pay $40 million, $35 million, heck, $30 million for a guy that's just supposed to be here for a year or two if you're trying to bring in somebody to be the long-term answer. That never really made sense to me. Most of the guys who are getting anywhere between 30 and 40 million, they don't want to just be a bridge guy. Those guys want to be the answer for some years to come. But we know that the Giants want to get someone in here to be that dude for the next 10 plus years. And so with the landscape being what it was, and understanding that this was a great opportunity to get a quarterback in the draft, it only made sense to me to bring in a veteran that has a skill set that matches what the team wants to do, who's willing to be a great mentor and a backup to a young guy, but who's also good enough to go out there and get you wins. And that's one of the things that I hope we get a chance to talk about. This Jameis Winston signing is not just we'll just get somebody to fill the seat while we lose a bunch of games. Jameis Winston's going to come in here, and if he's the starter, he's trying to get some dubs. But it's a unique person that's able to handle that role. Alex Smith couldn't do it in Kansas City, and that's why he had to go, because he still wanted to be a starter. And when you get a Patrick Mahomes, you can only sit him on the bench for so long. A guy like Jameis Winston is going to be willing to accept his role, but be ready if his number's called. And I think that's why it was a great pickup for this team, especially when you're talking about that contract.
Gene, there's been reports that the Giants, despite signing Jameis Winston, are not necessarily out on Aaron Rodgers or Russell Wilson. That being said, and I see you're laughing when I ask you about this, but that being said, do you think if they were to land one of those two, that would pretty much close the door on them maybe looking to get a quarterback at number 3?
Absolutely. And I think that the only way it's one of those two is if it's Aaron Rodgers, right? Because if you bring in Russell Wilson and you pay him what some people are saying that he's asking for, which is somewhere around $30 million, if you pay Russell Wilson that, Jameis Winston is going to outplay him in the training camp and preseason. Like it will be them once again just handing the job to somebody like they did to DJ back when he, in my opinion, was outplayed by Tyrod Taylor. I think that's setting the team up for a lot of questions that they don't want to answer. Now, if it's Aaron Rodgers, okay, right? Because now you have guys who have the arm talent that's similarly adept at dealing with the New York weather and being able to cut through the winds. They can drive the ball deep, although Winston does it more than Rodgers does these days. But they have strong arms. They can get the ball to guys on the move. That makes more sense for what this team wants to be as an offense than Russell Wilson does. And I said on a Giant issue that the type of money that they paid Winston leaves all the doors open. But I also can't understand why you would sign Jameis Winston, then go out and get another veteran. And now you've got two of these, quasi-bridge type veterans that are sitting on your team. I don't know. It just seems a little foolhardy to me. And I do think a lot of that comes from people got to have things to talk about this time of year. I don't think you go out and get a veteran quarterback who can come in here and do everything you want him to do, and then go out and sign another veteran quarterback. So then your entire fan base can look at you and go, what are you doing? Like, how are you allocating this money? So that doesn't make much sense. But if they do decide to do that, Aaron Rodgers is probably the move, not on Russell Wilson, who we saw struggle to have the ball cut through the air in Pittsburgh. He couldn't get it out there in Pittsburgh. It was moon balls in Pittsburgh. I don't know what it's going to look like over here in New York, New Jersey.
Gene, just staying with the quarterback situation at a moment. I know when I last had you on, you were very high on Shadur Sanders. I believe he's had his pro day, if I'm not mistaken.
No,
he hasn't had it yet. All right. But all right. With that being said, I mean, there's been some talk that his stock is dropping, and I'm not sure why his stock would be dropping if he hasn't worked out at the the Shrine Bowl. He hasn't worked out at the Combine. He hasn't had his pro day yet. Why would his stock be dropping realistically?
Aha. See, that's what we have to do now, because this is lying season. We talk about it all the time, PT. This is the time of year when everybody starts lying. Somebody leaked something. I'll let you in. Somebody leaked something during the Combine that Shadur Sanders was terrible on the board when he met with Giants. Like, the Giants had a chance to talk to him, and they said that he was terrible when he was fantastic when it came to breaking down his own stuff, like the schemes that he works in. But when they asked him to do something that he hadn't seen before, he was absolutely horrible at it. Doesn't make a lot of sense. You know why? Because he's had 5 different offenses in 6 years. I mean, in 4 years, excuse me. 5 different offenses in 4 years, 6 different offensive coordinators. He's seen everything. He's done all of this stuff before. Most of the guys that he's had as an offensive coordinator are guys who have NFL experience. The last 2 have been. So this idea that he somehow went out there and didn't understand football outside of what he's already learned is crazy. But you know what it is? It gets people talking, because now with the Giants being at 3rd, you got to get those rumors out there that might be able to drop his stock down, just in case Cleveland is considering taking him, just in case Tennessee is considering taking him. It's lion season, so I take all of this stuff with a grain of salt, like Salt Bae would say. I'll just sprinkle some salt on it, just a grain, though. I don't put anything more into it. And I'll say, anytime you hear about people stock dropping and nobody can point to a legitimate reason why, it's likely a lie.
That said, Gene, when you look at the fit, what the Giants offense is all about, what Shadur Sanders' strengths are, is it a good fit in your opinion?
See, and that's another thing. If you look at, I'll answer a question with a question, which I don't like to normally do. Did Tyrod Taylor fit this offense? Seemed like he did a really good job operating this offense. Well, Shadur Sanders is Tyrod Taylor plus, right? He plays a game a very similar way. It's anticipation throwing when it's the deep ball. It's not waiting to see the guy come open and then trying to launch it as far as I can. It's anticipating the guy getting open based off what he sees. It's getting the ball out and dishing it to his receivers in a position that allows them to run after the catch. You're going to hear me say this a lot this offseason. These receivers need to catch the ball and be able to put 2 feet on the ground before they get hit. That didn't happen a whole lot last year. And when it did, they had fantastic days. So the more you're going to get these receivers to get 2 feet on the ground and not get hit, the better it's going to be. That's what Sanders is going to be able to do. By the way, Cam Ward's pro day is going on this week as well. So this week, Cam Ward's pro day will have been, I think it'll already have been
Would have been Monday.
Monday. Monday was his pro day. Shadur Sanders' pro day is in April, the beginning of April, but that's going to be nationally televised. So you're going to get a chance to see these guys perform. And in the case of Shadur Sanders, if you paid attention to any of the internet stuff with Well Off, you could see him throw the ball almost every other day out there. You can see how he's throwing it, see how he's spinning it. So the people who say, oh, his stock is dropping, and I think when it comes to fit, anybody who comes in and commands the offense and plays with a level of anticipation, they're going to be a good fit here in New York.
Hey, Giant fans, imagine watching your favorite team live, feeling the energy of the crowd and witnessing unforgettable moments. There's nothing like experiencing a big game in person, and getting tickets shouldn't be stressful. That's where Game Time comes in, making it easier than ever to grab last-minute seats at unbeatable prices. Game Time Picks Curation makes it so easy to find better value for tickets to sports, concerts, comedy, theater, and more. I just checked Game Time just before recording this, and there are amazing deals on some huge matchups coming up. And they offer super deals and the lowest price guaranteed, or Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference if you find a seat in the same section and row for less elsewhere. With seat views before you buy, no surprise fees, and a lowest price guarantee, you can book with total confidence. So go on and take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the promo code Locked On to get $20 off your first purchase. That's promo code Locked On, spelled LOCKEDON, to get $20 off your first purchase. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest prices guaranteed. All right, Gene, let's open it up now. We've been talking about the quarterbacks. Let's talk about the other things the Giants have done in free agency and how that has set them up potentially for the draft. I know they're still the best player available regardless of position, but still, you and I both know that if they have, like a Patrick Mahomes on the roster, wouldn't that be nice? They're not going to draft the quarterback number one. So looking at what the Giants have done on both sides of the ball, how have they set themselves up to where maybe they lessened the need for a position, or maybe they, made that need that they had coming in more of a priority because they weren't able to really address it?
So I think what they've done on the defensive line and even to a certain extent, the offensive line. I'm not going to say it rules out them going offensive line in the first round. I'm going to say it makes it highly unlikely that they go offensive or defensive line in the first round. If you look at the guys that they re-signed, they essentially re-signed guys so that they could run back their entire starting offensive line once again. When was the last time that the New York Giants opened the season with the exact same offensive line that they had the year before?
Can't remember.
So wouldn't it be fantastic if they had the opportunity to do that, like for the first time in God knows how long? Or what if Andrew Thomas isn't ready to go at the beginning of the year? We already know what the move is now, because we saw it at the end of the year last year, and that lineup had some success. You had Illuminor move to the left side. You had Evan Neal go back to the right side. Notice nobody said anything about Evan Neal's play once he went back and started at the right side again. It's really interesting how they just arbitrarily decide when he's bad and when he's good. But they had both of those go. You've got Van Roten over there at right guard, but we've also seen that Jake Kubas is a guy who they really, am I pronouncing his name right?
Kubas, I think, yeah.
Kubas.
I think, yeah.
From North Dakota State. I really like him. He's shown that he can be a starting level guard. He's a backup right now. If what I think is going to happens, which is Evan Neal moving down the guard, if that happens, now you have Van Roten playing a backup role as the backup center guard over there. They signed some veteran swing tackles, guys who are spot starters at tackles, so that if somebody does get injured, they don't have to go to the street to find a dude. That tells me that they're probably not going offensive line early, probably not in day one, and probably not with the second round pick. On the defensive line, if you look at the guys that they signed, at first blush, it's not going to make you go, oh my gosh, like they really did a job. But here's what they did, and it's low key. And I talk about this. I talk about this a little in my good, great, and uglies for a couple of the dudes. But Jeremiah Ledbetter, they signed him. He's an interior defensive lineman, strong, really good at the attack. But what is he really good at? Playing against the run. At least that's where he's been most successful, right? They also signed away from the Cowboys, Chauncey Golston, who's been a defensive end, defensive tackle. He's played the 3 technique, he's played end, but he's a run stopping end at the D end. He's not like a guy who's trying to get out there and get you 10 sacks. They also went out and signed it, and you were just talking about my good, great, and ugly. This one is just dropped today, or will already be out there. Excuse me. Roy Robertson Harris, who's a guy who's played D tackle and D end. Why is that significant? What if the plan is to have these edge rushers who are really good at rushing the passer, but just okay at run defense, get a little time off on first down and second down and allow these bigger body run defenders to occupy those places? I could see a world where you see all three of those signees, Ledbetter at the 3 technique, or excuse me, Ledbetter at the 1, or at the 3 technique, excuse me, with Dex at the 1, and then Golston and Harris out there on the edges for run stopping purposes. And then when you go to a pass rushing situation, you could see Golston move down to the 3 technique because he's the better pass rusher out of all 3 of them, especially from the interior. And now you have those 2 cheetahs on the outside able to just pin their ears back and go. I think you lessen the amount of reps for those guys. You get better overall output out of them. So I think that tells me we're probably not in the market for a blue chip first round, maybe not even second round defensive tackle. I think that they're going to look to improve in the areas that we've talked about up until now. The first or second round pick is going to be a quarterback. And whatever is not is probably going to be another skill position player. That's kind of how I see it happening. Could it be an Abdul Carter at 3? It could. But I just think that as far as interior defensive linemen, those 3 guys that they've signed kind of seal that they probably are going to look to platoon this thing a little bit more on the interior than we probably think they should.
Gene, when you look at the roster makeup right now, to me, and tell me if you agree or disagree, I'm confused about 2 positions. I'm confused about what they're doing at receiver because it seems like they either have an outside guy or a special teamer or a slot. And there just seems to me, no rhyme or reason. The other position that kind of confuses me a little bit is cornerback. They play primarily zone. They do mix in man coverage, but it just seems like it's not yet a fit for what they do best. Do you see it the same way?
I definitely don't, and this is no disrespect to the wide receivers that they signed. Outside of obviously, Slayton. I really do believe they believe that they mismanaged Slayton last year. I think that they believe they didn't get the most out of Slayton last year, or else why do you bring him back? Right? If you think that that's what he is, then why even pay him? Just go ahead and let him go and bring in somebody else. So that tells me, okay, we know he should have been a bigger part of this offense, and we think that with better quarterback play, he will be. As far as cornerback goes, Paulson Adebo's a smart guy who is adept at playing man and zone coverage. So I think that that's a great pickup, but it also allows him to be the zone guy, and you can still have Banks be the man guy when you want to play those combination coverages. What I'm really interested to see is, are they going to put Javon Holland as the deep safety, as the one high safety, and not play a game where they're kind of rocking and rolling? Because if I'm being honest, like, I don't really need to see Tyler Nubin on the 3rd level. He's not a 3rd level safety, in my opinion. Not consistently, right? Like, he should be the 2nd level safety. He's a better tackler than Holland is, and Holland should be the guy playing on the 3rd level where he can rob things and get over to deep balls when he needs to get over the top of them. I think that's the way they play. The depth at cornerback is interesting because Cordell Flott didn't play a bad season last year. So now if Cordell Flott is your next man in, that's not a bad position to be in. You already have your nickel sewn up. You know who's playing there. I think everything kind of falls into place at the defensive back position. I'm a lot more worried about wide receiver and the depth there than I am about cornerback, especially if the plan is to allow Adebo to be more of the zone corner, if you will, because I think Banks will get better at it as he does it more, but that's not something he had any or much experience at up until last year.
Gene, in terms of the overall roster, we always talk about sneaky needs, and they filled up some of their sneaky needs. But do you see any other positions currently on the roster that you say, we're not really talking about it, but we probably should? Because, and remember, the draft is not just for this year, it's for years to come. So when you look at, the situations, the contracts, and the age and the health of guys, is there a position or 2 on this team that you feel we should be talking a little bit more that we're not talking about?
Yeah. I think that no one's talking about it, and I got killed for it when I said it, but I think you need to upgrade at linebacker. I think you need to be able to get a guy. And again, anytime you say certain things, right, it comes off as if you have something against the player that you're saying might need to fill a different role. I think Micah McFadden is getting everything out of his talent that he can. People are like, oh, well, this is what he's done in his first, 3 years. My problem is I think this is Micah McFadden's ceiling. I think that he is who he's going to be. He's a guy who is explosive and instinctive, but sometimes he makes terrible run fits, and sometimes he misses critical tackles, and sometimes he gets absolutely devoured by offensive linemen when they run to the second level. It's no diss on him. It just is who he is. And I think in order to really unlock what you want the defense to be, those two linebackers have to be able to operate at a level where they're playing fast and they're playing smart. I was really disappointed with Okereke's season last year. I don't know who to blame that on. I don't know if it's Okereke. I don't know if it's the defensive scheme. I just know it didn't look right. But if that happens again this year, you gotta do something. You can't go into a third year of him playing the way he played last year, because that's not winning football on a consistent basis. I think if he gets back to who he is, that's a guy. That's your dude. You need another dude next to him, and then what happens is that Micah McFadden becomes the third linebacker when you do want to put three linebackers on the field, because he's athletic himself, and Okereke are athletic enough to play in zone coverage. But then also, if one of those two gets nicked up, now you bring in a Micah McFadden who has a lot of experience, who can hold it down in the short term until your starter's back. It's no diss against Micah McFadden, but when I had said that I thought that the Giants should go out and sign a guy like Mosley if he's healthy, the linebacker from the Jets, people are like, oh my gosh, he's old, he's this. McFadden's better than him right now. It was like he had a debilitating injury last year. The year before that, he had 150 tackles for 2 years straight. Like, we were talking about a guy barely getting over 100 tackles who still plays some special teams. These are not the same dudes we're talking about here. There's levels to this thing, and if you ever want to be good, you can't start like leveling off at okay. You've got to continue to strive for good. People want to get Evan Neal out of here, right? But if we're being honest, Micah McFadden is Evan Neal at linebacker. He makes really good plays, but then he also has some times where he busts. Remember, we're talking about an Evan Neal that only gave up 4 sacks last year? And people act like he was a turnstile, like he just gave up 22 sacks or something. But that's the perception versus the reality. The perception for Micah McFadden is that he's this 150 tackle potential dude. But those dudes, it don't take 2 and 3 years to figure out. They hit the ground running. Linebacker, running back. Those are the two positions where you come in and you can be a killer right now. There's really no big curve from college to the pros, because at linebacker, it's see ball, get ball, right? At running back, it's run the ball. So I think linebacker is the place where I go, is this the best we can see at this level?
I agree with you for what it's worth. I wrote up, actually, I did a mock draft for this show, and I mentioned linebacker. Of course, I didn't take the linebacker because I had the quarterback to take, but there was a linebacker that I was looking at, and I was like, yeah, the Giants definitely need to address the linebacker group. So just thought I'd put that out there.
And there's some great linebackers in the draft, by the way. There's some great linebackers. I don't know if I'm taking one at third, but
no, I'm not taking one at third. But a guy, I'll tell you who I was looking at. I was looking at a guy by the name of Demetrius Knight out of South Carolina. So, a guy who instincts and, just I forget, I don't remember exactly how I justified it, but he was a guy I was definitely looking at.
Yeah, there's a lot of linebackers in this draft, and it's either got to be Micah McFadden making a quantum leap to that 130, 140 tackle type of guy, or it's got to be an improvement being made and putting some competition in place that can take that position to another level.
All right, Gene, I want to ask you one last question. And this is kind of interesting because I'm seeing more and more people kind of weigh in on this situation. You mentioned Abdul Carter at the start as a possibility at 3. What would that mean then for Kayvon Thibodeau? Because you look at Thibodeau, he hasn't been horrible, but a lot of people are saying that he hasn't quite lived up to his draft pedigree. Do you agree with that? Would you look to move him if they were to get Carter? Or do you just find a way to get all 3 of them, plus Dexter, plus Chauncey Golston on the field at once?
Yeah, I think that having Abdul Carter on the team probably means that you're not looking at a long-term relationship with Kayvon Thibodeau. But that doesn't mean in the short term you don't take advantage of the fact that you have 3 guys there. You know as well, you know how I feel. I feel like a lot of the hoopla that gets made about some of these players are much ado about nothing. Kayvon Thibodeau is in a position where last year he had double-digit sacks. Who was on the other side?
Burns.
Right?
So the other 2 years ago.
Excuse me, sorry,
Yeah.
not last year, technically now, 2 years ago, 2 seasons ago. Who was on the other side?
It was a combination of Fox.
It was like Fox and Boogie Basham and
Ojulari.
Ojulari, but he was injured a lot that season, so he was out. So that meant that he was getting the opportunity to rush without somebody on the other side taking away sacks. It was also a down year in sacks for Dexter Lawrence. So now, a year later, you add Burns. Dexter Lawrence has one of his best years early on as a sack guy. Thibodeau gets injured. So now you have Burns taking up sacks. You have Lawrence taking up sacks. You have Thibodeau not playing as many games as he did the year before. You still got him dropping in the coverage for some reason. I have no clue. I'm yelling at the screen every time I see it. He still had 5.5 sacks. And ladies and gentlemen, you know who's still out here getting money, playing good football that you like said, hey, we don't want to see here. Look at all of the edge rushers that the Giants have pushed away over the season, all of the defensive linemen that the Giants have pushed away over the seasons, and they're still out here playing really, really well for other teams. Sometimes you just have to be patient and allow somebody to mature. Kayvon Thibodeau's 23 years old. Evan Neal's 23 years old. You don't throw away 23-year-old high-level talent. You have to be able to nurture them through until you get to full maturity. That's why they have 5-year contracts, so that you can get to that point, right? If at 25, he's not what you want him to be, then move on. But at 23, you're ready to pull the plug on a guy that had double-digit sacks 2 years ago when you just brought in a guy who's never had double-digit sacks? It doesn't make a lot of sense to me. Even if you think Brian Burns is better, which I wouldn't argue on, his production doesn't say it. So or at least his max production doesn't say it. So at the end of the day, you got to let a guy be able to mature. And I think that's the problem with Kayvon Thibodeau. But do you need everybody to be a double-digit sack guy? Or do you want to have sacks in bunches by group? If Thibodeau gets 8 next year and Burns gets 9 and Lawrence gets 9 and let's say they draft Abdul Carter and Abdul Carter gets 7 and you get 3 from Golston and 2 over here, isn't that the whole point, to have it not all fall on one person? Like when the Steelers go out there, they're much better when you've got somebody opposite of TJ Watt. When it's just TJ Watt and he's the only thing you got, when he goes down, the whole defense goes awry. And so that's the problem that we see. We see it all around the league. When the one elite pass rusher that you have goes down, do you have another one? And when you have another one, that's usually where you see the defensive lines that are dominant. Kansas City with Jones and then Karlaftis out there on the edge, right? What San Francisco was doing when they really had it popping, when they had 3 and 4 different defensive linemen out there. Philadelphia, they just had 2 or 3 guys leaving free agency. You won't even know it. You know why? Because they are loaded with dudes. And then they just added another 5 or 6 sack dude in Azeez Ojulari because the Giants decided they didn't want to keep him around. You got to be patient, and you've got to have more than just 2.
Kind of hard to do, though, when your backup is up against the wall and you have to win, which is, again.
That's probably why you don't. That's probably why you don't take edge rusher at 3.
Well, I mean, they might. Who knows? But
I'm just saying, like, if you're trying to win, look around the league. Which edge rusher is accounting for which one edge rusher is making the difference between wins and losses? Trey Hendrickson was one of the best sack artists in the league last year, and the Bengals defense was one of the worst defenses in all of the NFL. So if you don't have everything else ready, and if your offense isn't producing, then it's not going to matter how many sacks your edge rusher gets. You could draft Abdul Carter. He can go out and have 13 sacks next year, and this team could go 2-15, and people will be like, "Oh my gosh, at least we have Abdul Carter." Huh? So, like, what's going to make the difference between winning and losing? And I guarantee you it's not going to be adding another pass rusher.
We all know what it's going to be, but whether or not they do it, that's another story. Gene, great stuff as always, my friend. I appreciate you coming on. I tell you, every time you come on, you drop some serious knowledge that makes you stop and think about things as they're being reported and portrayed in the media and stuff. So I do appreciate you coming on. He is Coach Gene Clemons. You can find his written work over on New York Giants on SI. And also, you can check out A Giant Issue. That is the podcast that he hosts, and he does it several times a week. So you can check him out on the New York Giants on SI YouTube channel, as well as wherever you get your podcasts. For Coach Gene Clemons, I'm Patricia Traina. Giant fans, thank you for spending part of your day with us here on the Locked On Giants podcast, and we will see you tomorrow.